Greetings, ladies and lads, and welcome to the age of fuck it, deploy the Space Marines. The cynicism of a salty fantasy player aside, the verse has come a long way from its clunky early beginnings, and even with their Primaris upgrade, the Stormcasts are overextending their forces on the battlefield. Today, I'll serve you guys 2 delicious ways on how to paint your Stormcasts, starting with an easy way to achieve a crisp look with their fresh color palette. After that, we'll go a little bit crazy and really go in hard on the sculpts themselves to show just how bleak their situation has become. First things first, we take a dark silver and a really dark blue to mix them up in a roughly 2:1 ratio. This color will be the perfect base for today's armor, and picking it up on a big brush, we quickly paint all of the metallic parts on our Stormcast with it. Don't worry about accidentally hitting any other parts. This early into our paint job, we want to be quick, not exact. And even if you tried, it would all at least now be in vain, as we pick up a pure silver and dry brush the entire armor to make it more reflective. Once that's done, we're doing another dry brush run, with an even brighter silver, this time being a bit more mindful with it, trying to only catch the most prominent parts as some sort of early highlight. Bingo! The armor is already done and it really doesn't look half bad. Hence, every poster boy of GW is at least somewhat related to the Ultramarines. It's only natural that they also gave the Stormcast blue as their accent color in every main iteration. I mean, I do see why. You really can't go wrong with it. Once the paint is dry, it may look like this. Uneven and with a clear brush ductus. This means that you've done it right, applying only a thin coat of paint, which we follow right up with another one to get the smooth finish that we're after. Holding onto the blue for just a second, we give the shoulder pads a quick touch up as well, before switching over to our medium white for the inside layer of the cloth. This can be quite finicky, because it's all too easy to accidentally slip some paint over the edge and get it on the blue side. We pick out the plume of the regular Stormcast with it as well, but for our special character Oswin, I'm going with a rich rose, to stay true to his own color scheme. As we have it on the brush already, we can move right on and paint the inside of his cape with it, before switching to a dark brown to pick out all of the leathery and wooden bits, like their massive crossbows and any pouches they have, but not the belts and straps of their armor. For those, we switch it over to a dark grey. All in all, a very tryst palette, so it's about time we bring some shine back into the mix, with a very bright, true metallic gold. I've finally followed y'all's advice and got myself something different than Citadel, and so far I've really enjoyed using it. Maybe it is confirmation bias, but this one from Army Painter handles so much better. I'm actually looking forward to using it more. We paint trims, weapons, trinkets and much more with it, and finally see the paint job come together in front of us. This Stormcast has what I think to be some sort of prayer bead with an icon of Sigmar's anvil, which I chose to paint in a medium khaki, which we also want to use to paint the fur of Oswin's coat, as well as any parchments we find on our warriors. After that, we are already entering the detail stage, picking a brownish red for the grips and handles of our weapons, followed by some true metallic silver to touch up all the details which have been covered up by a different color, especially on the crossbows. Oswin also has some small details on his coat, which I almost forgot, but once we've got them covered, it's time we take care of the bases, starting with a dark grey for the cobblestone on Oswin's fully printed one. After that, we take care of the local flora, with a rich brown on the tree stump and roots, But because just that would be rather boring, we should take a different color like a mustard brown for example, for the wood behind the bark. The leaves naturally get picked out in a forest green, before we finish it up with a dark brown texture paint on the earth. Because this texture paint comes with grains of sand mixed into it, it's quite good at shaping the bland bases of the other Stormcasts as well, though it will very likely ruin the brush you're applying it with, so make sure it's an old one that you wouldn't use for much else anyway. Alright, with all the base colors in place, it's time for a black wash to give these miniatures some shade and depth. Just slob it on in quick brush strokes, and make sure that you cover the bigger areas extra quickly to avoid tight marks, and maybe pull some paint out of the recesses, as too much pooling is as bad as too little pooling. The speed painting portion of this video ends here, but I'd highly recommend you keep watching, as there really is not a lot you need to do if you want them to look absolutely stunning and pristine. We keep going with a very bright silver, to pick out all the areas where the armor reflects the most light. This isn't rocket science at all. Just follow the light of your table lamp and sprinkle it where you think it'll look good. Though, less is definitely more here. This effect is quite subtle when done correctly, but the difference it makes is always incredible. After the armor, it's time we highlight the cloth and shoulder pads, starting with a sky blue for the folds, and just as with the armor, all the areas that reflect the most light. Once that's done, we go over the same areas again, but this time with a finer brush and an even lighter blue, only catching the very crest of the folds. On the broader folds, I do this kind of V shape that you can see here to make it look brighter and more interesting. Try and copy what I do first, but there are so many different folds that you'll find on your miniatures that you won't always get a perfect reference. Just go with your gut in those cases. You'll see what does and doesn't look good in no time, don't worry. On the shoulder pads, I let myself be guided by the reflection of the lamp again, and place the highlights in a kind of wave of quick and rough brushstrokes. I quite like the result of this unblended highlight, and fully wet blending them is just too much unreasonable effort anyway.
So me think, why waste time, say lot
Strokes
when few
strokes
do trick?
The white cloth and plumes get highlighted the same way, as well as Oswin's plume and cape, for which we first use the same color as before, followed by a bright rose after that, and an even brighter pink after that. It's quite similar to what we did with the blue cloth, so if you want to experiment with different colors, you definitely can. This recipe has proven to be very flexible. After all that work, it's nice to unwind by easily highlighting the fur of his cape with a light khaki dry brush, followed by an even lighter, almost white dry brush. The last parts that need some work done are Oswin's Baltea. Some rich brown on the folds, followed by a few rougher strokes of mustard brown, and the only thing that's left is the base again. Honestly, I struggled quite a bit to decide between a grey or a khaki dry brush for the ground, so I tried both and then settled for the grey as the superior one. And once that was settled, we can take a watered down light grey to give the cobblestone some more texture, and we're done. Holy hell, would you look at that! I am actually baffled by just how clean these guys look. Definitely an army worthy of a god. And thinking back at how easy it was to paint them, these guys definitely take a spot in the ranks of the most effective paint jobs we ever did on this channel. Great fun, but that's only part of what we're here for. As we all know by now, Sigmar lied to his Stormcast. The situation is getting worse by the day, and with ever more enemies piling on, the so-called Eternals are spread ever thinner, like butter is spread on too large of a slice of bread. Longer hours, bloodier battles, and less time for rest results in what you are seeing now on screen. And if you wanna know how we achieve this look, just sit back, relax, and let me take the wheel. Okay, we're here to ruin this Stormcast. But I wanna start off slow, with just dirtying up his clothes a bit. The easiest way to get this pristine cloth to look like it's been dragged through the mud is to take some brown wash and lightly wash the clothes roughly to the halfway point. I'm actually using a bit too much wash here, as this technique usually relies on many washes being applied over one another, each one getting closer to the bottom of the mini, leaving parts of the previous wash untouched. The only real flaw with this technique is that you have to wait in between the coats to make sure they are properly dry, because otherwise you'd run the risk of tearing off the previous layer. A blow dryer is a viable shortcut here, and once you're in like 3 to 4 coats, the cloth should look like this. The white parts are probably best to showcase this technique. It would of course only make little sense if the cloth was dirty, but the armor was not, so let's change it up with a watered down dark brown. We don't want to paint the whole thing dark brown, but rather help it flow in the recesses to simulate dirt building up in those places. Just as before, I'd recommend to get just to the knee with the heavy stuff, and only apply little bits here and there above that. Though, that depends on the layer of dirt you wanna cake your miniatures in, of course. The dark brown is the old, caked layer, so now we take a medium khaki to simulate the dried off mud and fresh dust collecting in these places, although not as heavy as the brown. We wanna add, not outshine here. We can even add this stuff low on the cloth, to show said dust collecting on a previously drenched surface. This also helps very nicely with further framing the mini, so definitely another move recommended by me. Not bad, not bad, but still too clean for my taste. So, what do most metals do when left to the elements? Oxidize and rust. So let's add some of that, starting with a dry brown paint on a beat up brush. We just stipple it here and there, trying to hit flat areas that don't experience much friction or other action, as those are the places where rust builds up the quickest. Then we hit those same spots with a mustard brown, finishing the look with a handful of really tiny dots of bright orange. I know it looks cool and we are easily tempted to do more, but we need to focus here. It only looks cool because there are so few of these dots. In terms of the overall rust, I guess we could do more, but I still want him to be seen as a Stormcast and not a Nurgle worshipper. It's really easy to paint chipped paint, as we only really need to take some dark paint where we want the damage to be, and then take a very light paint to show where the light gets reflected from the chipped paint's edge. Easy peasy, but that's not why we're here. No. We want to bring down the hurt on these soldiers, so take your scalpel and get to cutting. Yeah, let's get deep with it. We want to see some change here. How many hits do you think these pauldrons need to tank in the heat of battle? How many times do you think these kneecaps get scraped over rocks and battlements? This sword looks like it's never crossed paths with another blade, and I assure you, there are beings definitely equipped and built to chip the steel of Sigmar's chosen. I did leave the staff alone though, because I felt like cutting off one of these spikes would look like actual unintentional damage, which is hilarious the longer you think about it, but all the other parts get the full experience, even the crossbowman. I'm imagining him having to fend off fiends with just his crossbow in close combat, adding 3 streaks as remembrance to a particularly close call that he had to block. If we play our cards right, the battle damage will look really convincing, with actually quite the stylized result. Why am I adding a small point with my blade here, you ask? Well, what about the result of blunt weapons and teeth? Yes, more! Let's rip these clothes and put some more holes in them. More! More! I mean, I am laughing now because I know the end result. Don't get me wrong, I was as anxious doing this stuff to my minis as you are now just watching this. With every hole I drilled and every time I slipped and ripped more paint than I wanted to, I thought, shit, did I just ruin my model? But it's kinda fun doing something destructive like this every now and then. And if you want more, I recommend having a look at my corrupted Death Guard Marine. That guy gets fucked up. Once we're done wreaking havoc, we pick up a pure black and paint over the parts of cloth that we ripped to shreds. As we tore off the previous paint, we do this to kinda re-prime these parts. Where the white inlay is visible, we can stipple some watered down black around the shreds to make it look like these parts caught fire previously. Otherwise, I'd recommend to pick up that khaki from earlier again and just redo the dust for an easy and convincing finish. When it comes to the blank metal, we just fill it in with the darkest, true metallic metal that we have. You can even mix in black or dark grey if you want. The shoulder pads get patched up just like I demonstrated at the beginning of this endeavor. Cover the damage with a very dark blue, and then reapply the medium blue around the craters. Finally, we want to take a little bit of very light blue and catch the edges where the light gets reflected. But only in one direction. For the gold, it's enough to just fill it in with dark brown. And for the dark brown parts, get some mustard brown for the inside of the wood. And that's it! The damage is done and our guys look great. But why have we not cut to credits yet? Well, my friends, taking some blood for the blood god, we add some gore to our warriors. Starting with our melee fighter's staff. On the head I only painted the outside facing spikes, as I thought that those would get the most action. And I also touched up the counterweight, as the thought of a skull getting crushed by this was just too good to pass up. We also bloody up his hands, cause why not? With the sword, it's important to only go from one side to the other in quick, single motions. Gosh, this looks good. I also decided for his boots to be bloody. Who knows how brutal these fights can get. Finally, I tried to flick some blood splatters on his chest plate, but even after several retries, it wouldn't work. Probably because this paint is just so viscous. A shame, but nothing we can't carefully work around. A bloody streak from the corner of his mouth and eye also goes so fucking hard. And there we go. A truly battle-bruised Stormcast Eternal. I won't be able to properly show off his weapons on the turntable, so let's take it all in now. I went way more sparing on the guy with the crossbow, as I didn't really see a logical reason for him to be as drenched in blood as his companion. But, you know, a little bit never hurt anyone. And with that, the third and last act of this video is finally complete. By Sigmar, what a journey. Over speed paint, to pristine, to battle bruised. What a great video to start off this new series on my channel. I hope you guys really enjoyed watching this video, and if you made it to the end, thank you so much. This really is a long one. As always, I'll have all the paints I used for this paint job down in the description of the video. And if you have any questions regarding the paint job or otherwise, be my guest and share your thoughts in the comment section. If you were wondering where Oswin was in this last part, he's actually a special character from the board game Stormvolt, a box I picked up secondhand and one I've never heard of before. If you know it, let me know, because I'm yet to meet someone who does. I just wasn't sure if I wanted to deviate from his card and sculpt, so I chickened out. I guess I didn't completely get out of my comfort zone. Anyway, if you want to see more miniature gore like this one, I highly recommend watching my 3 Stages of Grime video. And if you want to tag along and see more of this series and all the other stuff I've got planned for this year, feel free to hit that subscribe button. As I am really looking forward to seeing you again in the next video. Until then, take care.